The other day I saw on my Discord one of the many pieces of F1 discussion that happens in the designated channel there, and one of the discussions was about the size and weight of the cars and how refuelling might help things, and how the refuelling days were goated because people could push all the time instead of cruising to numbers, and it led to better racing as a result. And while I'd be the first to press X to doubt on the better racing thing, thinking about it, there are still a few pros and cons to refuelling in Formula 1. And in this opinion piece, I'll be presenting both sides and see if there is some sort of compromise, because it is an interesting discussion topic that will likely never have an end in terms of said discussion. Typing F1 refueling Reddit into Google gives you way more results than you'd think. Or want. Also as well, this video has nothing to do with the amount of overtakes per race. It should be the quality of them rather than the amount. Good old DRS tax. And it is true, other forms of circuit racing have refueling in their series. NASCAR, IndyCar, British GT, IMSA, WEC, and so on. But in the case of the Endurance series, there are rules in place to improve driver and crew safety. Turning engines off in the pit lane, for instance, and in some series they make the driver actually get out of the car while the fuel is being put in. There's also minimum pit stop times, maximum fuel flow rates, which F1 had, and other ways to keep it safe. With how fast the teams want the cars turned around in a pit stop in Formula 1, it opens things up for mistakes. Massa at Singapore being a key example as they tried to get him serviced quickly in the aftermath of Crashgate. And I can't recall ever seeing a NASCAR car or an IndyCar on fire in the pit lane as the result of a botched fuel stop, so this might just be an F1 issue. Because everything needs to be done at 1,000,000 miles an hour in the service time, the potential for human error is much higher, especially when you've got 22 mechanics crowded around the car to get the tyres changed and the fuel put in. At least it was around 22 in the 2000 season according to Martin Brundle. And in the past there was the Jos Verstappen incident, which, okay, was caused by some sort of tampering with the fuel hose, but all the teams had done it per the advice of the people that made the thing, so I mean, yeah, it's a complicated one. But because nobody can fuel up anymore, it means all the cars start on the same fuel load, which means that more is put into the skill of the driver than it all being sorted on the pit wall. Because now the driver just has to worry about their tyres and not worry about what lap they or the guy ahead is pitting on. Because if you're on a much higher fuel load compared to the guy you're racing, there's no point in overtaking him. You might as well wait for him to pit, then get a stomp on to try and build a gap while you have a little less fuel and he has more fuel, and then pit for your stop. Overcuts are basically guaranteed, and seeing an undercut get pulled off is a little bit more exciting, but that's just me. And that leads me to something else, the size of the cars. These modern cars are massive, and even in the mid-80s when refueling wasn't allowed, the cars were smaller than they are today. And lighter. I mean, obviously safety is a key part of this. Look at how much bigger the current generation Ford Focus is compared to the first generation one, the latest version of the Vauxhall Corsa being the size of an Ascher from a couple of generations ago. Also, Polo and the Golf. And on your screen now is the size of F1 cars through the years. You've got Schumacher's F2004, Alonso's 2007 McLaren, Button's Brawn, and then the 2013 Red Bull and 2014 Williams. You can see between 2009 and 2013 the car gets longer due to the larger fuel tank, and then longer again in 2014 because of the hybrid system. While the 22 car does have a slightly shorter wheelbase than the one that came before, the fact it's so big and heavy versus the 2004 car makes it look sluggish as hell on camera. You could argue for less fuel on board and cars that don't look so lumpy, but because of the safety cells and other bits and pieces of safety equipment, it's tricky to do. But transporting all that fuel and all the gear to put the fuel into the car is expensive, and Formula 1's current obsession is cost cutting. You can only spend this much, you can only use this many engines, this many gearboxes, yet we still want you to race back to back in Azerbaijan and Canada as they did last year. We also want you to do sprint races, cut carbon but do 23 races plus those sprint races a season. The hypocrisy continues. The price of fuel is also pretty expensive, and the less you have to transport and use, the better. And it is impressive how powerful these engines are and the speeds the cars can hit relative to the consumption. It currently sits around the 6 mile per gallon range or 46 litres per 100 kilometres for everybody else. Back in the 2000s I can't find the figures, but I bet they're pitiful. 2.5, 3 miles per gallon, something like that. But that's not to say that the refuelling era of Formula 1 didn't produce some strategy big brain moments. At twisty and hard to overtake tracks such as Hungary, you could light fuel the lead driver and have him pull a gap, while having the other car heavy on fuel holding up the rival team's lead driver and having him not be able to overtake, forcing the other team to figure out a new strategy to be able to get ahead. In 1996, Olivier Panis won the Monaco Grand Prix by basically filling the tank to the top at the start of the race and not putting any fuel in during the race, only changing his tyres. Thankfully, due to the carnage of that race, the time limit expired before he ran out of fuel, only just beating David Coulthard to the line. Then there's the "we need 20 qualifying laps from you" strat that Ross Brawn gave to Schumacher at the 98 Hungarian Grand Prix, I think it was. There's a few others, but these are the main ones. But on the flip side to this, with refueling, you remove any strategic flexibility. If you go with the last fuel rules, which is race fuel for third qualifying session, you're locked into your strategy before you've even left the pit lane. You could short fuel to go for pole, but if you're spun round at turn 1 or get a bad start at a track that's tricky to overtake at, then you can't go to a one stop. You're stuck on what you started with. With the current system, you can drag your tyres out for another few laps. Before, you're limited by your fuel. And even though I did say the amount of overtakes is irrelevant, it is interesting to see the statistics pre and post refueling. Now obviously the current numbers have DRS tax bolted on, but I managed to find figures for the pre-refueling age, so pre-1994. When refueling was introduced in 1994, the amount of overtakes on track dropped, and it still stayed lower than 1993 into the glory years of the 2000s. Then when refueling was banned at the end of 2009, the amount of on-track overtakes goes up, but then in 2011, the Pirelli DRS tax kicks in. Now personally, I prefer the racing without refueling. I don't think it should come back, and people that say it was better action with refueling must have been watching a different broadcast. But that's just me. With no refueling, there's no sitting and waiting for the pit lane to do its thing, and while yes, the Pirelli tyres are made out of chewing gum and are there for the show, and the DRS is overpowered, the racing is stuff you can actually see with your own eyes on the TV rather than by what's on a spreadsheet on the pit wall. Like I said, it also puts more into the hands of the driver, which is what we want really. They've got to manage their tyres, which can be a bit naff, but there's still the strategy flexibility there. There's more that can happen in F1 as a result, and it usually does. So then, some opinions on whether or not F1 should go back to refueling. If you think I've made some points that make you nod your head, then like the video, and subscribe with the bell on if you haven't already so you never miss out on any future videos. Massive thanks to the people at Patreon for the continued support. If you want to help out with things around here, then a link to Patreon is in the description, along with links to socials and to Discord. Well, there's super thanks as well if you just want to do a one-off tip. So until next time, I've been AdmiralLaWind, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.